In A Song of Ice and Fire, there are more than a few debates when it comes to morals and ethics in the Game of Thrones. What makes someone right or wrong, good or evil, honorable or dishonorable, in the eyes of the realm? One such conversation that is often brought up in these conversations is Jaime Lannister's killing of Mad King Aerys. It's a very pivotal action in the story, as it's what really sets us down our current path. The slaying of King Aerys saved 500,000 lives, and prevented the capital city of King's Landing from being little more than a glorified funeral pyre. It's also set up Daenerys and her eventual rise to power, and the rebirth of the dragons, and enabled Jon Snow to live a somewhat comfortable life in the north before things get amped up. I did do a video where I discussed what I think would have happened if Aerys had succeeded in his plan to blow up the city, which I do recommend you guys check out if you haven't already. But back to our topic. Aerys Targaryen was a cruel man. Not always, but he eventually became the scum of the earth, burning people alive, wiping out families, neglecting his grandchildren, abusing his wife, and threatening to kill a city of innocents just so Robert Baratheon couldn't say he won the war. At least, not fully. Anyone would say that the world was a better place without him. Well, except maybe Viserys, but he was crazy too. I also did a video about him, but moving on. But when confronted with the man responsible for removing this rot from the world, Jaime Lannister is only ever really met with disdain from the people around him, for breaking his solemn oath. And none, I feel at least, are so judging of Jaime as Lord Eddard Stark. Or at the very least, when it comes to conversations of honor and dishonor, Ned and Jaime are often put into the conversation, and Ned's opinion seems to be the one that haunts Jaime the most out of everyone. After all, he was the first man to see Jaime after he killed Mad King Aerys. Eddard Stark is held up by many in his universe, and by the fandom outside of it, as one of the most honorable and good men within the story. A guy who tries to follow the rules and do what's right along with what's required of him at any chance he can. But even with that being said, given everything we know about Ned and the things he did in the past, is he really right to judge Jaime Lannister? Does he even have the right to? We often hold Ned to this really high standard in the story, and for many in the fandom, we definitely use him as a moral compass in the world as well. Ned is a great example of a good man forced into a terrible situation. He's content with his life in the north, until he's pushed to go south and put his family in danger when his surrogate father dies. His son falls from a tower, and it's under speculation that his best friend the king might be in danger. We follow his journey to solve the mysteries of King's Landing's court, and his pursuit of familial justice while he also does his best to save his best friend from destruction. He uncovered that his children aren't really his, and the Lannisters have been playing the crown for years. But before he can do anything about it, King Robert dies. And even at that point, despite everything they did to his family, and to Robert, Ned still tried to offer Cersei and her kids a way out so they would survive. A lot of people see this as his most foolish action, his penchant for mercy in dire and less opportune times. And while that may be true, it also showcases how hard Ned tries to be good. He's willing to put things aside if it means less people die. Ironically, you can say more people ended up dying because of this, but that's besides the point. Ned is definitely built as this paragon of virtue, something that is pretty rare in Westeros, and in some ways, he seems like a foil to Jaime Lannister, at least at the beginning of the series. But when you really take the time to look at their respective stories and how they compare to each other, Jaime and Ned aren't too different. Of course, ignoring their differing definitions of family bonding time. Ned holds it against Jaime a lot for killing King Aerys and breaking his oath. Despite removing a tyrant from power, Ned hardly views the act of killing this raving madman as being justice or in any way honorable. And a lot of this has to do with his view on the situation. He thinks Jaime was just serving himself, only attacking King Aerys when it looked like he was going to lose. Ignoring the entire context of why Jaime did what he did, and solely looking at things from the perspective of Ned, it somewhat makes sense why he would look down on Jaime, and why he also has respect for other characters like Barristan Selmy, who joined Robert's Kingsguard despite being one of the best knights on Aerys' Kingsguard. He doesn't blame Barristan the Bold for staying by the side of King Aerys. He swore an oath and kept it until the end, even if the man was undeserving of it. For Ned, there is something to respect there. He fought, lost, and stayed true to his word. He risked his life for Aerys, even when the situation was dire, whereas it seemed the only reason Jaime turned on Aerys was to save himself. which is why I believe he says Jaime served King Aerys when serving him was safe. This could be taken a couple of ways. Ned could have said this in regards to Aerys and Jaime's relationship. Aerys seemed to be turning on everyone close to him, and he definitely hated the Lannisters towards the end of his reign. So it might have just been a matter of time before he decides to put Jaime on a pyre as well. So maybe that's why he turned on him. Or he could be referring to the rebellion as a whole, where it became more likely that Jaime might die for King Aerys, even if he wasn't personally sentencing him to death. Either way, it stands that Jaime broke his oath when it went and got tough, and Ned judges him for it. But at the same time, it is kind of strange that he does, because Ned did the same thing too. Aerys, as horrible as he was the king of the Seven Kingdoms, and he didn't get the throne through foul means. He didn't kill anyone for it, unless you want to say he somehow masterminded Summerhall to expedite his rise to power. He didn't usurp a brother or start a war to claim it himself. He inherited it, and the realms were an oath to follow him as the king, which was broken by the Stab Alliance, when Stark, Tully, Aeron, and Baratheon rose against him. Ned is a rebel, and he broke his oath to serve the crown and participated in the downfall of House Targaryen. Now you can make the argument that it doesn't matter, because King Aerys, as some would say, broke his oath to protect the realm when he killed his loyal lords first, like Brandon and Eddard Stark. But it is a bit muddy in that context because technically, it was treason for Brandon to just show up in King's Landing and demand the life of Prince Rhaegar. And Lord Rickard asked for a trial by combat, and the king had every right to choose a champion, even if they were a bit too hot to touch. Okay, that last bit was a bit of a joke, but I think the Brandon remark is kind of valid, since he just showed up to King's Landing with threats and accusations against the crown prince, with no proof to the guy's father. So he kind of had it coming no matter how well-intentioned he may be, because his sister went missing. After he died, Aerys demanded the heads of Ned and Robert, who did nothing wrong, and Jon Arryn rose to defend them. They definitely had the right to defend themselves, but for a character like Ned, who claims to be loyal to the crown and follow the rules, he still chooses to go against it. He doesn't go to the capital because his king made an order, nor does he go back to Winterfell because King Aerys' command is unjust, but as king, it would be criminal for him to bear arms against him. No, with his life on the line, the life of his family and friends, he chooses to stand and fight. And this is what makes me think of what he said to Jaime, that he only served King Aerys until it wasn't safe anymore. And you could argue that same point for Ned. Based on what I've said, Aerys had been going off the deep end for years, and it's only when the life of the Starks is put in danger, and the people closest to him, that Ned decides to do something about it. He fought to save his sister and the people around him. It's an honorable and righteous thing, but it also doesn't change the fact that it's still technically considered treason. And then, he replaces the Targaryen dynasty with the Baratheons. For someone who's all about the rules and following the law, he doesn't make an effort to set things right. And I say right with air quotes, because after Aerys, Rhaegar, and Rhaegar's family died, Viserys should have been king. But Ned doesn't go to Dragonstone or across the Narrow Sea to install him on the Iron Throne. Nor does he try to make Jon king after he finds out about Lyanna and Rhaegar. Now, of course, there is most likely a valid reason for why he didn't do this. One, Ned doesn't seem to love or hate the Targaryens in the books, so he's really not going out of his way to help them or going out of his way to hurt them either. But at the end of the day, Ned most likely knew that naming a Targaryen as a ruler after the fighting and the rebellion would not work out in any capacity. There would be many opposed to the idea, especially Robert, since it would have been like they were fighting for nothing. They ousted the Targaryens just to install them back into power again, and giving the throne back to the Targaryens really makes no sense in the grand scheme, because it all but ensures that they retaliate against them later on. The point I'm really trying to get here is that Ned comes at Jaime for killing the Mad King and turning his back on his oath, when once upon a time, he did the very same thing when his life was under threat, and he still bent the rules to ensure more prosperity for the realm. Not only that, he even helped usurp the Iron Throne, and went ahead and bent or broke the rules by helping his best friend get into power. It just goes to show that for all the slack he gives the lion, the wolf is not above making questionable decisions, because it's the right thing to do where it makes the most sense for the time being. And this is even taken a step further in the main timeline, where Ned takes justice into his own hands to oust the Lannisters from power because it isn't right. He alters the dying words of his best friend, ignores his final request to raise Joffrey into a better man, and tries to take the throne to restore the natural order by making Stannis the new king. On the outside looking in, to most people who don't know the context of everything, Ned looks like a villainous traitor. His best friend asked him for help, made him Hand of the King, and not only entrusted him with guiding the realm, but the protection and prosperity of his family, specifically his son and heir. But the moment the king dies, he tries to capture the royal family and replace them. Even though we, the audience, know the truth about Joffrey and his siblings, to many they are still legally and publicly known as the children of King Robert. He looks like an oathbreaker and a criminal, much like Jaime did when he killed King Aerys. But like Jaime, they were trying to do what was right for the people around them, for the realm. Though you could really question if Ned was right, because Robert was a usurper himself, and under normal circumstances, he would never have taken the Iron Throne. Not only are the Targaryens still alive overseas, his actions plunged the realm into war. Well, it was already destined for war, but his actions kind of make it bigger. His capture causes Robb to rise in rebellion, and with his death, it makes him king. Robb's quest for justice results in Winterfell and the North being taken, and Ned's other children either die, are used as hostages and political tools, or basically left to fend for themselves. House Stark is torn apart because Ned tries to do the honorable and right thing. Of course, though, that wasn't his intention. Either way, when it comes down to the question of who's right and wrong, I do think it's understandable why Ned judges Jaime when he can only look at things at face value. He didn't know Aerys planned to blow the city. He only knows that when he came to claim it, he saw Jaime after killing King Aerys, the man he swore to defend. Which is a pretty important detail in the books, because he didn't just kill the Mad King and wait around before moving on. Jaime killed King Aerys, climbed the steps of the Iron Throne, which is described as a monstrosity, a mountain in the books, and he climbed all of its steps and sat there until the rebels came. Then he laughed when Ned showed up. It just looks like it was a cold-hearted killing, that like his father Tywin, he saw an opportunity to advance and be on the better side of history, and took it. The reality is much darker, and maybe if Ned knew the truth, the full extent of what Jaime had to endure at King Aerys' side, and the king's plan, he might look at him a bit differently. But nothing is guaranteed. But to answer today's question, does Ned have the right to judge Jaime Lannister? Yes and no. Yes, because he severely lacks context on the situation and can only see things at face value. And even though he himself has bent the rules of their society, it was never without some kind of justification to go along with. Like his family being in danger, his life being in danger, along with those closest to him. Because he lacks information, he can only go on what was provided to him. And that was the sight of a man laughing after he broke his oath and killed his king. It doesn't seem like a merciful, kind, or honorable act by some tortured man who finally saw an opportunity for justice and to save lives. And on the flip side of that, no, he doesn't have the right because Ned himself is a hypocrite for the same reasons I listed above. He broke his oath and went against the grain when the time called for it as well. He didn't rise up against Aerys for his cruelty until the stakes were personal, much like Jaime. And like Robert says in the books, someone was going to have to kill Aerys, even if it wasn't Jaime. So Ned is still complicit in his own treason, and holds to that treason years later. He may advocate for the Targaryens to be left in peace and not killed by Robert, but it was their throne he helped to take, and he doesn't seem too eager to give it back to them anytime soon. Like I said earlier, it really wouldn't have been optimal, but the point stands. Does that make him evil? No. But it is a fact that Ned, for all his virtue, is a bit muddy himself. And that's why I like Game of Thrones, because even the more moral characters have things about them worth scrutinizing and analyzing. But that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell me your thoughts down below, and I will see you all next time.